Nobody expected it to go this far. J.D. Vance is known for being composed, controlled, precise with his words. A man who came up through Yale Law School and built a political career on the ability to articulate complicated ideas under pressure. But something happened at a recent event that shattered that image. Vance snapped. Not metaphorically, not in the polished, calculated way that politicians sometimes perform frustration for the cameras. He snapped, in a screaming match, with a student. And the moment it happened, everyone in that room knew they were watching something that wasn't supposed to happen. Let's set the scene. The event was the kind of appearance that vice presidents make regularly. A university setting, young people asking questions, the kind of forum that is supposed to demonstrate accessibility and the willingness to engage with the next generation of voters. Those events have a predictable rhythm. A few friendly questions, a few challenging ones. The official handles them with practiced ease. Everyone leaves feeling like democracy worked the way it's supposed to. That's not what happened here. Because one student, in asking their question, hit something. We don't know exactly what it was. Whether it was the specific content of the question. Whether it was the tone. Whether it was something about the moment itself. The accumulated pressure of everything Vance has been navigating, that made this particular exchange the one that broke through the composure. But whatever it was, it worked. Vance responded in a way that nobody in that room was prepared for. His voice rose. The controlled, measured delivery that has become his trademark disappeared. And what replaced it was something rawer. Something angrier. Something that looked, to the people watching, like a man who had reached a limit he didn't know he had. The student didn't back down. And what followed was the kind of exchange that political careers are supposed to be immune to. A screaming match. In public. On camera. Between the Vice President of the United States and a college student. That footage is now everywhere. And the questions it raises are significant. Let's start with the most obvious one. What was the student asking? Because the content of the question matters enormously for understanding what happened. If the student was asking a legitimate policy question in a legitimate way, and Vance's response was disproportionate, that tells one story. If the student was deliberately provocative, designed to create exactly this kind of moment, that tells a different story. Both are possible. Both happen at political events involving controversial figures. But here's what makes this particular incident significant regardless of the answer to that question. The Vice President of the United States lost his composure in public. That's the fact at the center of this story. And no amount of context about what the student asked changes that fact. Because the job of a vice president, at public events, with cameras rolling, includes the ability to handle difficult questions without breaking. That's not an unreasonable expectation. It's a basic professional requirement of the position. And Vance didn't meet it. Now let's talk about why that matters politically. J.D. Vance has built his public image on a specific kind of toughness. Not aggressive toughness. Intellectual toughness. The ability to take on hard questions, hard critics, hard moments, and emerge looking like the smartest and most composed person in the room. That image has served him extraordinarily well. It's part of what distinguished him from other political figures in his orbit. Part of what made people take him seriously as a future presidential candidate. A screaming match with a student doesn't fit that image. It fits a different image entirely. One of a man under pressure who couldn't handle a challenge from someone with significantly less power than himself. And that image, once it exists in people's minds, is very difficult to erase. Because voters are watching not just for policy positions. They're watching for something harder to define but easier to recognize. They're watching for temperament. And temperament is what was on display in that room. In that exchange. In the moment when the Vice President of the United States raised his voice at a college student. Let's talk about the student's side of this. Because in any confrontation like this, the person with less institutional power has more to gain and less to lose. The student walked into that event as a relative unknown. They walked out as the person who made the vice president snap. That's a significant shift in public profile, regardless of what they were trying to accomplish. And the fact that they didn't back down, that the exchange became a screaming match rather than a one-sided outburst, says something about what kind of moment this was. It wasn't Vance losing his temper at someone who wilted. It was a genuine confrontation. Two people, one with enormous institutional power and one with almost none, going at it in a way that the powerful person clearly was not prepared for. That dynamic, the vice president not winning an argument with a student, is the part of this story that will linger longest in political memory. Let's zoom out. Because this incident doesn't exist in isolation. It exists in the context of everything else that has been happening around J.D. Vance over the past several months. The silent crowd, the gas price admission, the reported tension with Trump, the advisor resignation, the 25th Amendment conversation. Each of those stories, individually, could be explained away, could be contextualized, could be managed. But together, they start to form a pattern. A picture of a man and a political moment that are both under significant pressure. And of pressure finding ways to escape in unexpected moments. A screaming match with a student is one of those moments. It's not the end of a political career. Politicians have survived worse. They've come back from more dramatic public failures and rebuilt their images successfully. But it's a data point. A visible, documented, widely circulated data point. About temperament. About pressure. About what happens when the composed exterior meets a moment it wasn't fully prepared for. And in politics, data points accumulate. Whether this one becomes part of a narrative that defines J.D. Vance, or whether it becomes a forgotten footnote, depends on what comes next. On whether he addresses it, explains it, or tries to move past it and hope the news cycle moves with him. What it does not depend on is whether it happened. It happened. The cameras were rolling. And the Vice President of the United States snapped at a student. That's the story. And it's not going away quietly. There is one final thing worth addressing directly. The people who will rush to defend Vance in the aftermath of this will make a specific argument. They'll say the student was provocative. That the question was designed to bait a reaction. That anyone in Vance's position would have eventually reached a breaking point given the sustained pressure he's been under. Some of that may be true. But here's the problem with that defense. The vice president doesn't get to choose which moments are fair and which ones aren't. The cameras don't stop rolling because the question was unfair. The public doesn't grade politicians on a curve because they're under pressure. The job is to handle it. All of it, even the provocative questions, even the difficult moments, even the students who are deliberately trying to get a reaction. Especially those. Because the ability to stay composed when someone is trying to break your composure is one of the most fundamental tests of political character. Vance failed that test in this moment. What he does next will tell us whether this was a one-time failure or something more revealing about who he is under real pressure. The world is watching. And waiting.